Alright guys, in our last video we did quite a bit actually. We created our profile reducer, profile actions, a bunch of action types, and we created our get current profile action and brought it into our dashboard. So when the dashboard's loaded, this actually gets called and it'll add our profile to our state, which in our case is just a blank object because neither one of the users we have actually have a profile. So we're going to continue on here, and we want to actually bring in two things from Redux into the dashboard. We want to bring in the profile state and the auth state. So to do that, we need to do our map state to props. So we're going to say profile, set that to state.profile. And we also want auth, set that to state.auth. And this should actually be wrapped in parentheses like that. And then let's pass in map state to props here. Okay, let's also add our prop types. Okay, we already brought in prop types, so we can just do dashboard dot prop types, and we have our get current profile, which is a property. So it's going to be prop types dot func dot is required. We have auth, which is an object, and we have profile, which is an object and is required. Okay, so now inside of our render, we need to make sure that we need to make sure that profile is our profile state is not equal to null before we actually try to render anything. All right, so inside render, right above the return, let's do a little destructuring. Let's get the user from the auth state first. So we'll say const user equals, and we're going to get it from this dot props dot auth. Okay, and then we're going to get two things. We're going to get profile and loading from our profile state. So that's from this dot props dot profile. Okay. Now what we're going to do is we're going to initialize a variable called dashboard content. Okay, so we're going to say dashboard content. We're just going to initialize it for now. And then we're going to do an if statement, or an if else, I should say. Okay, so we want to do if profile is equal to null or loading is true. Now, profile and loading, it's coming from our profile property, which is coming from our profile state in Redux. Okay, if we look at our reducer, if we look at our profile reducer, we're looking at, whoops, the wrong file. We're looking at profile, which is initially null, and loading, we're taking those values, okay, when get profile is called. And get profile is being called when we enter the dashboard because we're calling this action here. So we want to make sure that it's not null. If it is null, then dashboard content, for now, I'm just going to set this to, let's see, let's set this to just an H4. And we'll say loading. We're going to put a spinner here, but for now I'm just going to say loading. Else, then for now let's just say dashboard content equals, I don't know, H1. We'll just say hello. This is going to change, but let's just do that for now. And then down here we want to actually add, I'm going to add a class name here of dashboard. Okay, and then we want a container. Let's get rid of this, and let's put in a container div And inside the container, we're going to have a row. And this is just pertaining to the theme that we created, the dev connector theme. I'm just typing it out. And then we want a call MD12, which was just a full column div. It's going to go all the way across. We'll have an H1. Let's give it a class of display-4. And we'll say dashboard. All right, and then underneath that is where we want to put our dashboard content, like that. So depending on if its profile's null or it's loading, it'll be loading, else it's going to say hello. So let's save that and see what we get. This get errors is never used in profile actions. Let's just fix that real quick. So if we go to actions, profile actions, we're not using get errors yet, so I'm just going to take it out. All right, that way at least we don't get that error. So back to the dashboard, and now back to the browser. Let's log in. And we get hello. All right, now I don't know if you saw it, but it actually flashed for a second. Watch when I reload. See the loading? That's because initially, before it gets called, it calls loading, okay, profile loading, and we're checking for that. We're also checking to see if it's null. So if it's null or if it's loading, it's gonna just output loading for now. All right. Now instead of having it say loading, what I want to do is have a spinner. Okay, so we're going to just use a GIF image, and we're going to create a spinner component. So to get the image, I mean, you could use your own if you want, but if you want to use the one I'm using, just go to the last video in this section, which will have all the source code for this the application up to the end of the section, and go into components, common, and you'll see spinner.gif, or GIF if that's how you pronounce it. Grab that and put that into, actually I'll just show you real quick. Let me pull up my, let's see, so dev connector, and we're going to go to component, client, source, components, common, and I'm going to paste in the spinner.gif. Okay, we're also going to create a spinner component, so we'll do that through here. So in common, let's say new file, spinner.js. All right, and this component's going to be pretty simple. So it's going to be a functional component. So I'll do RFC tab, and we'll even leave the export default here. But we want to bring in that image. So we're going to say import spinner from /spinner.gif. Okay, and then inside the return here in the div, let's put an image, and we're going to put, for the source, we're going to set that to spinner that we brought in. And for the alt, I'm just going to say loading, like that. Let's actually put this stuff on separate lines. So we get the source. Let's also give it some style. So I'm going to say style. We'll set that to our double curly braces. And I'm going to say I want a width of 200 pixels. And let's do a margin of auto. I want it to be in the middle. And we want to display it as a block. And that should do it. So let's save this file. And then what we'll do is bring this into our dashboard. So we'll say import. And let's see, we want spinner from, and we want to go outside of the dashboard into common, and then we want the spinner. All right, and then all we're going to do here is replace this H4 with our spinner component. So let's save that. and let's go and try it. So we'll go back, let's reload, and real quick you can see that spinner. Okay, and obviously the longer it takes, the longer it will show. So that's exactly what we want. We're going to have that spinner on quite a few different components or different pages. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to work in here. This is all set. If profile is null or it's loading, then we want to display a spinner, and that's it. Else, then what do we want to do? We want to do another check, because the way that I want this to work is if the user has not created a profile, like if they just registered and they just logged in, I want it to say, you know, you have not set up a profile yet, and have a button to go to the create profile component, which we'll create in a little bit. If there is a profile, if it's not an empty object in the state, then we want to display our dashboard, which will have the actions, the buttons to edit the profile, add an experience, all that. We're also going to have the experience and the education subcomponents, which will display those things as well, and they'll be able to delete them and all that stuff. So how do we check to see? Let's actually open up our Redux extension. Let me put this up here. So we want to go to Redux, and what we want to check is to see if this profile right here, if it's empty. Okay, if it's an empty object. So to do that, we're going to go inside this else, and let's say check if logged in user has profile data. And the way that we can check for an empty object, I mean, we could bring in that isEmpty function, that special function that we created. We could use that. Well, actually, we really couldn't, because that would also test to see if it's null. But we already did the null check, so we could do that. But an easier way without having to do that is to just say if object.keys pass in profile. So if object.keys.length is greater than 0, then that means that there's something in that object. Okay, object.keys just gets the keys of an object, of the profile object, and then we're seeing if there's actually any in there. If it's greater than 0, that means that then there is some in there. All right, so we want to put an else here as well. So if this is true, that means that they have a profile, and we want to go on to display profile. So I'll just say dashboard content equals, and for now let's just put an H4, and we'll say display profile. We'll say to do display profile. What I want to focus on now is if they don't have one, because neither one of our users have one. We don't even have a way through our front end to create one yet. We'll be working on that soon. If they don't have one, let's put a comment here. We'll say user is logged in but has no profile. So we'll say dashboard content equals, and inside here let's put a div, let's put a paragraph with a class of lead, which will make it bigger text, and also text dash muted, which will make it light. And we're going to say welcome, and in here we can actually get the user's name, because remember in the user object we have a name value. So we'll do that, and then we're going to put a paragraph, and we're going to say you have not yet set up a profile, please add some info. All right, and then what we'll do is create a link to /create-profile, which we haven't created this route or the component yet, but we will. And we'll add a class name here of btn, btn-lg, and btn-info. All right, and for text, we'll just put create profile. And that should do it. Actually, we need to bring in link. From React Router. Okay, and that should do it. And whatever is in this dashboard content will display right here. So let's save. Let's see, looks like we got an error. React Router, oh, React Router DOM. All right, so let's go back, and there we go. So welcome, Brad Traversy. You have not set up a profile. Please add some info. That's exactly how we want this to work. And you see the little spinner when I reload. Good. If we log out, right now, it's just going to keep spinning because it's looking for a profile which is null. All right, now we're going to make it so that we can't even see this page if we're not logged in. Okay, we need to set up a private route because we don't want this to happen. So I think before we move on and create the create profile page, I think that we should handle the private route situation so that when we log out, it directly takes us back to the login page. All right, so let's do that.